Before meaning takes form, there is the world. Land extends outward. Sky turns slowly above it. Light moves across stone, water, and grass without preference. At first glance, all places appear the same. One stretch of ground gives way to another. No point announces itself as distinct. No place asks to be remembered. Space feels continuous, undivided, open in every direction. A person may move freely, yet arrive nowhere in particular. In such a world, movement is easy. Orientation is not. There is no clear center, no natural point of return. Time follows a similar pattern. Morning passes into evening. Evening fades into night. Days succeed one another without leaving a mark. This is time as flow alone. It passes, but it does not gather. Life continues within this neutrality. Shelter is built, food is gathered, fire warms the dark. Yet these acts remain provisional. What is made today may vanish tomorrow. Nothing insists on permanence. Where everything is interchangeable, nothing becomes essential. Where all places are equal, none can anchor existence. The world offers surroundings, but not yet a world in the fullest sense. Early human communities experienced this condition not as an idea, but as a bodily reality. Paths disappeared. Landmarks shifted. The ground refused to hold memory. Without fixed reference, return becomes uncertain. And without return, experience loses depth. This neutrality is not hostile. It is calm, but it is also fragile. A life lived entirely in undifferentiated space remains exposed, open to movement, but lacking orientation. To inhabit the world fully requires more than motion. It requires placement. Yet at this stage, nothing compels the body to stop. The eye passes over the land without lingering. Stone lies beside stone without distinction. Water flows without invitation. Trees rise and fall without drawing attention. Nothing interrupts continuity. And yet, within this sameness, a quiet tension exists. Because human presence does not merely occupy space, it responds to it. Even in the most neutral landscape, there emerges a hesitation, a pause in movement. The feet slow, the breath changes, the gaze begins to rest where it once passed over. This is not yet meaning, but it is the condition from which meaning will emerge. To linger is already to distinguish. A completely uniform world cannot be lived in for long, not because it lacks resources, but because it lacks orientation. Human life requires points that resist replacement, places that hold. In their absence, space remains open but uninhabited. Time moves forward but does not return. This is the world before it is set apart, before direction, before center, before renewal. It is calm, it is continuous, and it is incomplete. Movement alone is not enough. A body can travel great distances and still remain unplaced. To move through space is not the same as belonging within it. Orientation requires more than motion. It requires reference. In a neutral landscape, The body adapts quickly. It learns where to step, when to rest, how to avoid danger. But these adjustments remain practical. They do not answer a deeper need. Because human existence is not sustained by survival alone, it seeks position. Not position as location, but position as placement. A sense of being somewhere that matters. Without this, experience becomes dispersed. Days accumulate, but they do not settle. The body wakes. It acts. It sleeps. Yet something remains unanchored. Orientation is the act of fixing oneself within the world, of knowing where one stands in relation to what surrounds. This knowledge is not calculated, it is felt. A person does not need to measure to know they are lost. The body recognizes it immediately. Steps become uncertain. Attention scatters. Movement accelerates without purpose. Disorientation is not simply confusion, it is exposure. To be without orientation is to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Early human communities understood this without naming it. They experienced the difference between moving through land and being held by it. The land that holds does not trap, it stabilizes. Orientation begins when movement encounters resistance. Not an obstacle, but a reason to stop. Stopping is not failure. It is recognition. The body pauses where the world presents a point of attention. Such pauses change behavior. Paths begin to repeat. Returns become intentional. Memory attaches itself to certain places rather than others. Over time, these places accumulate weight, not through explanation, but through use. Orientation grows from repetition, from returning again and again to what resists indifference. A place that can be replaced easily cannot orient. A place that demands return begins to anchor. The need for orientation is inseparable from memory. What cannot be remembered cannot be inhabited. Memory requires structure. It gathers around points. When every place is equal, memory dissolves into sequence. When one place differs, memory gains shape. Orientation transforms time as much as space. Before orientation, time passes. After orientation, time begins to return. A return is not repetition. It is recognition. To return is to confirm that a place endures beyond a single moment. This endurance reassures the body. It stabilizes expectation. Orientation allows life to extend beyond immediacy. Plans become possible. Care becomes worthwhile. Without orientation, nothing lasts long enough to justify investment. The human need for orientation is therefore not symbolic. It is existential. It determines whether the world can be lived in or merely crossed. Orientation does not require a large or dramatic feature. It can arise around a clearing, a bend in the land, a particular stone. What matters is not scale, but resistance to sameness. Once a place holds attention, space reorganizes around it. Distances acquire meaning. directions matter. Near and far are no longer interchangeable. From this moment, the world begins to develop structure, not imposed, but discovered. Orientation does not explain the world, it makes living within it possible. This need persists even when landscapes change, even when structures disappear, because orientation is not inherited from the world alone. It is enacted through response. Where the body stops, the world begins to organize. And where the world organizes, the conditions for meaning appear. In the next movement, we will observe what happens when the neutral surface of space is finally interrupted. The surface of the world does not always remain smooth. Most of the time, space unfolds without resistance. One place gives way to the next. But occasionally, movement falters. Nothing announces the change. The land does not shift, the sky does not respond. And yet, the body slows. The feet hesitate, the breath adjusts. Attention gathers where it did not before. The place itself is unchanged. Stone remains stone. Water remains water. What changes is the relationship. This is the first interruption. Not created, not imposed, but recognized. The place resists equivalence. It cannot be exchanged without loss. Movement stops here, though it continues elsewhere. This distinction is immediate. It does not require explanation. The interruption is not dramatic. It is quiet. And because it is quiet, it can be missed. But when it is noticed, behavior changes. Paths begin to repeat. Returns become intentional. Memory gathers, not because one decides to remember, but because the place insists. The interruption introduces a before and an after. Before, space was continuous. After, it is articulated. Near and far begin to matter. The world does not shrink, it organizes. This first distinction does not yet form a center, but it prepares the ground. It reveals that not all places are the same. From this moment onward, the world can no longer be entirely neutral. A reference has appeared, quiet, undeclared, a place that holds. Once a place interrupts the flow of space, it begins to change, not in form, but in status. It is no longer one location among many. It becomes difficult to exchange. Other places may resemble it. They may offer the same shelter, the same resources. But resemblance is no longer enough. The place that holds cannot be substituted without loss. This loss is not practical, it is experiential. To go elsewhere feels different than to return here. The distinction is subtle but persistent. A replaceable place can be abandoned easily. An irreplaceable one demands return. Return strengthens attachment. Attachment deepens distinction. Over time, the place gathers density, not physical weight, but accumulated presence. Memory settles there. Events cluster. What happens elsewhere passes through. What happens here remains. The place begins to hold time as well as space. Moments linger longer. Absence is felt more sharply. The world begins to develop points of gravity. Movement reorganizes around them. Paths curve inward. Distances are measured from them. This does not limit freedom. It makes orientation possible. To leave an irreplaceable place is different from leaving any other. Departure carries weight. Return carries relief. The place does not confine, it stabilizes. Through repetition, through care, through attention, the place becomes difficult to forget. It resists erasure. Even when unoccupied, it remains present. This presence exceeds its visible boundaries. Approach slows, speech quiets. The place begins to instruct behavior without issuing commands. It teaches that not all ground is equal, and in doing so, it prepares the conditions for something more stable. An irreplaceable place is not yet a center, but it makes one possible. From here, structure can emerge. When a place can no longer be replaced, it begins to hold. Not only memory, but orientation. Other locations remain accessible, but they are no longer equivalent. Distances begin to matter. Direction acquires meaning. Movement is no longer uniform. It curves, it returns. This is how a center emerges. Not declared, but lived. A center is not chosen arbitrarily. It appears where return becomes necessary. From this point, space reorganizes. Near and far are redefined. The surrounding world does not disappear, it takes position. The center does not dominate, it anchors. Paths begin and end here. Journeys are measured from it. Departure carries direction. Return carries completion. Time behaves differently around a center. Moments gather. Sequences become stories. The center holds continuity. It allows life to extend beyond immediacy. Without a center, experience scatters. With one, experience accumulates. The center stabilizes expectation. It makes planning possible. Care becomes justified. Investment gains meaning. The center does not restrict movement. It gives movement purpose. To leave is to depart. To return is to arrive. The distinction is decisive. Through repetition, the center strengthens. Through neglect, it fades. Its endurance depends on attention. Early human life organized itself around such points, not through instruction, but through habit. The body learned the center before the mind named it. Standing here feels different. Posture shifts, breath steadies. The center communicates without language. It teaches where one is, and by extension, who one is in relation to the world. From this anchoring point, boundaries will be drawn, structures will rise, time will begin to return. The world is no longer only open, it is oriented. Once a center holds, space gains depth. The world is no longer experienced as a flat surface alone. Attention lifts upward. It sinks downward. Above and below begin to matter. The sky is no longer distant. It becomes related. Clouds move. Light descends. Sound travels. The ground is no longer inert. It supports. It absorbs. It remembers. The center stands between these layers. Here, height and depth meet. Human posture reflects this alignment. Standing upright, the body joins what is above and what is below. The head turns upward. The feet remain grounded. Breath moves between sky and earth. This vertical awareness does not require explanation. It is lived. Raising the gaze changes experience. Lowering it does the same. The world now appears layered, not divided, but ordered. Events above affect life below. Events below support what rises. The center stabilizes this exchange. It becomes a meeting point. Here, movement does not only travel outward, it also ascends and descends. Depth enters experience. Meaning thickens. The vertical dimension introduces scale. What lies above feels larger. What lies below feels older. This sense is not measured, it is felt. Through vertical connection, the world becomes more than surroundings. It becomes structured. The center now anchors not only direction, but depth. From here, human life begins to mirror the order it perceives. Movement slows. Attention focuses. The world holds from above and below. Existence is no longer suspended. It is situated. Once space is oriented, it can be shaped. Not reshaped entirely, but clarified. To build is not merely to shelter, it is to mark. A boundary is drawn, an edge appears. Inside and outside are no longer the same. This distinction does not exclude, it defines. Within the boundary, movement slows. Attention gathers. Outside, the world remains open. The act of dwelling creates a pause in space, a place where activity can accumulate. Walls rise not only to protect, but to stabilize. The roof gathers the sky. The floor holds the ground. Between them, life settles. This settling is not passive. It requires repetition. Entering, leaving, returning. Each return confirms that the place endures. Through dwelling, time changes its behavior. Moments collect. Days connect. What happens here matters more than what happens elsewhere. The dwelling becomes a reference point. From it, the surrounding world is approached. The boundary does not imprison, it allows orientation. Inside, memory thickens. Outside, movement resumes. This balance sustains life. Without boundaries, experience disperses. With them, experience gathers. The world beyond the dwelling is not denied, it is contextualized. The enclosure does not eliminate uncertainty, it contains it. By shaping space, humans shape time. Daily acts gain rhythm. Repetition gains meaning. A world emerges that can be lived in, not merely crossed. From this ground, ritual will arise. Return will deepen. Time will renew. But first, the world must be made inhabitable. Once a world can be inhabited, time begins to change. It no longer moves only forward. Days still pass, nights still return, but repetition now carries weight. Morning is not only another morning, it is a return. Evening does not simply end the day, it completes it. This is time that gathers rather than dissolves. Moments do not vanish once they pass. They settle. Through repetition, events begin to echo. The same acts performed again are not identical. They deepen. This repetition does not produce boredom. It produces familiarity. Familiarity allows attention to move inward. In such time, the past is not gone. It remains accessible. To repeat an act is to return to its origin. The first time is not left behind. It is re-entered. Time becomes layered. The present contains what has already been lived. This layering changes experience. Weight replaces haste. Urgency gives way to rhythm. Time now supports life instead of eroding it. The dwelling becomes a site of return. The center anchors duration. Here, beginning and ending touch. Completion restores balance. Return renews meaning. Time no longer threatens to carry everything away. It offers renewal. This does not abolish change. It contains it. Change occurs within a frame that can be revisited. Through repeated moments, life escapes pure irreversibility. The world feels less fragile. What is lost can be restored in another form. Time becomes something to participate in, not endure. From this rhythm, story will emerge. Memory will organize. The passage of time has gained texture. When time gains rhythm, memory begins to organize. Events no longer drift away as isolated moments. They gather. What is remembered is not everything. It is what returns. Memory selects by repetition. What happens once may be noted. What happens again becomes significant. Through return, experience gains outline. Story emerges from this outline, not as record, but as presence. A story does not describe the past as something finished. It makes it accessible. To tell is to re-enter. The events spoken are not distant. They occur again in the telling. In this way, memory resists erosion. What might have been lost is held. Return is the key. A remembered place is one returned to. A remembered time is one revisited. Without return, memory fades into sequence. With return, it becomes structure. Story binds time together. Beginnings and endings touch. What was first remains present. Through story, the present thickens. It contains more than itself. This does not deny change, it stabilizes it. The world remains open, but no longer forgetful. Through memory and return, experience becomes inhabitable. Life is no longer only lived forward. It is lived around a remembered core. From here, attention turns inward. The body itself will become oriented. Orientation does not remain external. It moves inward. Once space and time acquire structure, the body responds. The body is never neutral. It stands, it faces, it turns. From the moment a person rises upright, direction enters experience. There is front and back, left and right. above and below. These distinctions are not learned, they are lived. The body becomes a point of reference. Movement begins from it. Return leads back to it. Breath passes between inside and outside. The body receives the world and answers it. Standing upright, the human form mirrors the order it inhabits. Feet rest on the ground. The head opens upward. Between them, life unfolds. The body becomes a place of meeting. Attention follows posture. Where the body turns, meaning gathers. Gesture becomes expression. Stillness becomes presence. Through repeated actions, the body remembers. Not as images, but as habits. Walking a familiar path requires no thought. The body knows. This knowing is orientation made flesh. Sleep, waking, eating, resting, all follow rhythm. The body measures time through repetition. In this way, orientation is not abstract, it is enacted. The body holds what the mind does not need to explain. Through posture and movement, the world is continuously aligned. The body becomes a dwelling, not enclosed by walls, but stabilized by rhythm. From this living center, attention will turn outward again, toward the wider world that continues to speak. Over time, the structures that once oriented life begin to soften. They do not vanish, they thin. Space becomes efficient, routes shorten, surfaces smooth. Movement accelerates, stops become brief. Places remain, but fewer of them ask for return. Centers dissolve into networks. Time follows the same pattern. Measured precisely, it loses texture. Moments are counted, not revisited. Days advance without circling back. Change becomes constant. Renewal becomes rare. Life continues, but orientation grows faint. Dwelling turns functional. Shelter replaces habitation. Boundaries persist, but they no longer gather meaning. Movement dominates. Return becomes optional. This shift is quiet. It does not announce itself as loss. It appears as freedom. And in many ways, it is. Yet something subtle changes. When everything is accessible, nothing holds. When all time is new, nothing returns. Memory fragments. Story loosens. Experience spreads outward without settling. Orientation is no longer inherited, it must be improvised. Some find it in routine, others in private gestures repeated quietly. The older structures do not disappear, they withdraw. They persist beneath surfaces unspoken. Even in a world that moves constantly forward, the need for return remains. It expresses itself indirectly, in nostalgia, in repetition, in the search for stillness. The quieting of meaning is not its end. It is a change in tone. What once shaped the world openly now works inwardly. And there it waits. What withdraws does not disappear. Even when structures soften, the need they answered remains. people still seek places that hold. They return without instruction. A room revisited after a long absence. A path walked repeatedly without purpose. A moment of stillness entered at the same hour each day. These acts are rarely named. They do not announce themselves as meaningful, but they endure. They persist because they answer something constant. Orientation does not require belief. It requires recognition. The world still offers interruptions, places that slow movement, moments that thicken time, centers that form quietly around attention and care. Even now, life resists being lived entirely in passage. Return continues. Memory gathers. Story reappears in altered form. The world remains capable of holding. And human life, despite its speed, continues to pause. In these pauses, structure returns, not imposed, not declared, simply lived. The world has never been only what it appears. Beneath movement, beneath change, beneath noise, there remains the quiet work of orientation. And as long as humans return, the world will continue to open itself to meaning.